This is episode 65 of Our Modern Heritage, the Home and Family Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jody Chaffee. This episode is all about the real reason why we need to tidy up. If you haven't seen all of the articles and things talking about the Marie Kondo, KonMari method of tidying up, then you might be living under a rock. I don't know. But it's something that is actually really important to me because I realized after watching all of these, I watched the show, one episode, and I was reading all of these articles about the KonMari method, and I realized how much I really know about this topic and why it's so important to our family culture. And it might not be the reason that you think, because we all know that having clutter is stressful. We all know that having clutter creates stress and it raises our cortisol levels, and I will talk about that too. But the real reason why we need to wrangle our clutter is because we cannot imbue our legacy into our stuff. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about in this episode. I know a lot about clutter because I'm the sixth of 7 children. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they go hand in hand. But my family had a lot of stuff because we just had a lot of people in our house. And I know it stressed out my parents, and I know that they tried really hard to control it. But they still live with all of our clutter, and it's really frustrating for them. And it's frustrating for me knowing that my parents live with a lot of our clutter, and they're trying to purge everything so they can sell the house that my family lived in for 40 years. And they've lived in the house for that long, and it's accumulated all of our stuff. And whenever each of us moved out of the house, we left our stuff. And growing up, I always shared a room with my sisters, and but then as I became a teenager, I finally got my own room, and I finally started to realize the joy and pleasure of having a clean, tidy space, that I had control over the space because it was mine. And so I would try really hard to keep it clean, but I was still kind of a mini hoarder because I had this giant box in my room that I would just, whatever I had that I'd bring home that even had the remotest sentimental value, I would put in this box. Like if we'd gone on a road trip, if we'd gone on a school trip, I would bring home like the pamphlet or the flyers from wherever we visited. I'd bring home notes that my friends and I would pass back and forth to each other. I would bring home an A+ that had a nice comment from my teacher, and I'd put it in this box. And I'd put things too, like I would put my favorite toys, or I'd put, things that I would grow out of and keep it in there. And I kept, I won this prize at Six Flags once. It was this inflatable thing, and I mashed it down and I put it in there. Or I'd keep Mylar balloons that I get for my birthday, these things that it's like, why? Why am I keeping this stuff? Over the years, I've been able to whittle that down to one storage crate somehow. But even that, I haven't looked at it for years and years. But one of the things that I have kept is my old drumsticks. So I played marching band in high school, and I played the drums, and I played the quad toms in particular. And I had the privilege of leading my drum corps for 3 out of the 4 years that I was in high school. And it wasn't necessarily because of my skill. It was just because of my passion for the music and for marching band. And I think my band teacher really appreciated that, and he allowed me to lead the drum corps. And each season we were allowed to keep our drumsticks, and we'd tape them up in these cool patterns and things like that. And I would keep these things. And I actually still have a lot of my drumsticks, which is silly because I can't even play drums anymore. This year is my 20-year anniversary of graduating high school, and that is a skill and a talent that just went by the wayside. But after I graduated high school, I found out that my band teacher named a drum cadence after me. I think it was one that we'd created, and so I really liked that one. And so whenever the drum corps would play that cadence during marching band, they basically had to call out my name, which is kind of weird. But at the same time, like it's a real honor to know that I left a legacy at my high school, and it's a passion that I had in high school that I loved marching band so much. And so that's really what it comes down to, is that we can't imbue our stuff with our legacy. When we leave this earth, all our stuff is going to be is a reminder of how much our children and our families miss us and how depressing that is. But what I want to be able to imbue into my activities and into my life is a legacy. I don't want my kids to hang on to my drumsticks as a reminder of me. I want them to hold the drumsticks or whatever, maybe even just a story of me, and create their own legacy of being passionate about something and carrying that over into their lives. So I just want to talk a little bit about why we have clutter, why we allow it to take precedence over our lives, and why we need to just let it go. I think it's healthy to regularly go through our stuff and purge things that don't serve our family anymore. I talked with Lee Waters and Britton Bennett a few episodes ago, and I'll include a link in the show notes to the episode, where Britton talked about how she likes to keep her home organized because when there's clutter, it creates what she called white noise. And that white noise drowns out the important things of our lives. And I noticed that theme in the first KonMari episode, that the show, the couple on the show observed that their family life was chaotic and that their chores were frustrating them. They would come home and just be completely distracted by all of the clutter and the chaos. And there's an article in the New York Times that I found, and it's called The Unbearable Heaviness of Clutter. And it talked about, of course, that they did all these studies with people in their 20s and 30s and college students and people in their 50s. And all of them who struggled with clutter had higher cortisol levels, and they had a tendency to procrastinate because they had to rifle through all their stuff to find things, and it was just anxiety, and so they would avoid doing stuff because they had to face the clutter in their space and in their time. And so then it talked about how everybody, men and women, their cortisol levels would go up because they would come home from a busy day of work or whatever to more work, more stress. They still had a laundry list of things on their to-do list after they came home because of all their stuff. And so that's one of the reasons why we are so stressed out by our clutter. That to me is a big enough reason because I don't want to have to come home or spend all day with my kids working on stuff only to have a huge list of things to do or a big mountain of things that's just distracting me. That's my biggest thing, is that I cannot ignore the clutter. I cannot ignore the stacks of things or the piles of toys. It's just sits there screaming at me, do something with me. And so I just get really, really stressed out about it. And so it's a big deal. It's distracting, and that's what's becoming like my mother legacy, is that I'm stressed out about our stuff. And that's something that I struggled with this understanding about what our coping strategies are, is that you need to have time to cope with the stress of your life and of your day. And if you're coming home and you don't have the space and the time to cope with the stress of the day, then your brain stays overstimulated and you never come down from being stressed out, and so you're never able to recover. And this happened to me back when I was learning about these coping strategies. I had one particularly rough day that my kids had trashed the house, and my anxiety was just like skyrocketing, and I couldn't function. And I had to take time out. I had to get out of the house. I stepped outside and was able to like regroup, but it was really hard. But at the same time, one of the skills that I learned was that if you just start cleaning up, then it's easier to continue. There's an article called Why Mess Causes Stress, 8 Reasons and 8 Remedies. And here are the 8 reasons. And this was written in the Psychology Today by Sherry Borg-Carter. And she says that clutter bombards our minds with excessive stimuli, causing our senses to work overtime on stimuli that aren't necessary or important. Clutter distracts us by drawing our attention away from what our focus should be on. Clutter makes it more difficult to relax, both physically and mentally. Clutter constantly signals to our brains that our work is never done. Clutter makes us anxious because we're never sure what it's going to take to get through to the bottom of the pile. Clutter creates feelings of guilt. I should be more organized. And embarrassment, especially when others unexpectedly drop by our homes or workspaces. Clutter inhibits creativity and productivity by invading the open spaces that allow most people to think, brainstorm, and problem solve. And finally, clutter frustrates us by preventing us from locating what we need quickly. So this isn't just for us as parents. Our kids see the clutter and they get overwhelmed too. I'll include a few links to articles in my show notes about why kids need minimalism. That, if you ever wonder why kids can go into a room with a ton of toys, mountains and mountains of toys, or they're scattered all over the room, and come out and go, I'm done, I'm bored. It's because they're so overwhelmed. They don't have the space to be creative. And they also don't have the space in their minds to process what's going on in their space. So kids really need minimalism. And a book that I really enjoyed reading about this was called Simplicity Parenting. And it talks a lot about this and how to downsize the clutter in our time and in our space to allow kids the freedom to be creative, to be able to process their, what's going on in their lives and in their world. When we overschedule them and we keep all this stuff in their space, then it's just overwhelming, and they get distracted and stressed out too, for all the same reasons. My friend Richie Norton wrote this article about the fear of missing out, and he relabeled it and called it, the acronym, right? FOMO, the fear of missing out. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we hold on to our stuff and we keep getting more stuff, is we assign so much status or value to having stuff. And but what Richie Norton talked about is he renamed it JOMO, the joy of missing out. Something that I've been learning a lot about with coping strategies is that we get so trapped in a scarcity mindset. We have this fear of missing out. We have a fear that we don't have enough, or that we just don't have enough value, or that we have to prove something, because we just have a scarcity mindset. But what I liked about this JOMO and the joy of missing out is that we're okay with missing out. And in fact, we specifically and intentionally design our lives to want to miss out on what's popular or what's expected, because we have something else, or we believe we're enough. And that's a really powerful message. So I'll include a link to Richie's article in my show notes. So there are a lot of methods out there for how to get organized. And that's why, when I see all this hype around Marie Kondo, I think it's very interesting, because that's only one approach to decluttering. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's more effective, and maybe maybe you'll glean something off of this article about another way that is useful to you. Because what I try to do is I try to every two times a year to take the time to declutter my space. I usually do it around in April and October. That that's the time to start to do something about the clutter. And I also have bags in the kids' closets that when they outgrow something, I just throw it in the bag and make sure that that gets donated at the time when, in those 6 months in April and October. So I have read The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I've also read Clutter Busting, Letting Go of What's Holding You Back. And I've read Get Organized the Clear and Simple Way. And I also like to learn more all the time about the Fly Lady. And these are the different things that I've learned from these 4 methods of tidying. So the KonMari method, I feel like, is a spiritual approach to tidying. I appreciate that she had the family in this first episode on the Netflix show to pause and close their eyes and thank their home for serving their family. And I mean, she gets a bad rap for giving objects, inanimate objects, a soul. That every time when you're going to throw things away, you thank it for serving you. But this is this can have just huge impact. I mean, just think about stopping to thank your home for serving your family. I could tell this would be a huge impact if we would pause and consider the labor that our home performs for us every day. I know that my house takes a serious beating every day. We have 4 kids that are rowdy, and we're home all day, and my kids pound on walls, they run up and down the stairs, they punch holes in the walls. I mean, I won't go into details, but my sons put holes all over their bedroom wall, and yet this house keeps us safe and warm, and we love it. But how often do I pause to thank my house for serving me? So Kondo encourages her clients to thank their possessions for serving them. I read in this article lately that, let me see if I can find the title of it. It's called What White Western Audiences Don't Understand About the Marie Kondo's Tidying Up. And I thought it was really interesting because it talked about how the KonMari method is a reflection of the Japanese Shinto religion, and it imbues objects with a soul. So everything that you own serves a purpose, and it had to pass through many hands before it got to your possession. And it has a life. It had a journey. And so you just become so intentional about everything that you bring into your life because it has this spiritual value to it. And I think I'd want to take better care of my things more intentionally if I felt this way and knew that each of these things served a deliberate purpose. So taking this element of tidying is useful for making decluttering an enlightening part of our spiritual development, to see it as a stewardship to take better care of our things and our space. While other decluttering books talked about pulling everything out and eliminating only what you don't want, and then do your best to organize all of this stuff that's left, Kondo's method was about taking all your stuff out and only keeping the things that you really want. So I thought that was interesting. It was a little backwards in a way. The clutter busting, I feel like, is a psychological approach to tidying. If you haven't read this book and you still aren't convinced about minimalism, then this book might convince you. Because what I enjoyed about this book is that it talked about how we allow our things to hinder our growth. And it's stuff that we don't necessarily need, but because we have given it greater value than it deserves, or sentimental value, monetary value, whatever, that we allow these things to become the white noise in our lives. He talked about different things and reasons why we hold on to our stuff. Like, for instance, if we have a pile of fitness equipment that we never use, but we don't want to get rid of it because we feel guilty because we spent so much money on this equipment, he says that you should just get rid of it so that you can just get rid of the reminder of the guilt. And, the book is just case study after case study of people who just felt so much freedom after getting rid of stuff that was just serving as a reminder of their guilt or their stress or their anxiety. So your things will not serve you just sitting there and giving you anxiety. He talks about how people would hold on to things for sentimental reasons are basically living in the past, that our parents' things will not serve to bring them back after they are gone, but they'll become a daily struggle to figure out what is valuable and what is not, or it will serve as a daily reminder of our grief. We cannot imbue our identity into our stuff. We cannot imbue our value into our stuff. We are who we are regardless of our stuff. Basically, Brooks Palmer is saying that we recognize our own inherent value regardless of our stuff, and that our value without our stuff. And we need to we cannot fill our lives with things that bring value. It just won't work. But like I was saying, our value is in the legacy that we leave, in the stories that we tell, and the passion that we adopt. Our culture would have us believe that if we have more stuff, then we have more worth. If we acquire all this stuff. Somehow our stuff defines our economic standing and therefore our personal value. But never mind that most of our stuff we acquire is financed. Never mind that we go into debt and accrue all kinds of debt with all of our stuff. I mean, not all of the debt that we have is frivolous, but is it all really necessary? I wouldn't say that Clutter Busting has a lot of practical tips for how to get rid of our stuff or how to get organized, but it does dive into the psychological reasons why we hold on to our things and why it's important to get rid of it all. So that's what I liked about that book. Get Organized the Clear and Simple Way, I feel like was a logical approach. I really loved this book. Like the KonMari method, it talks about, sorting out your stuff by category and just but you sort it all without judgment first. So you just start by mapping out your area and how you want it to look, pulling everything out to sort it into categories. Then you can see how much stuff you actually have. If you pull out all of your shoes and you realize you have 100 pairs of shoes, you're going to go, wow, I guess I don't need this many pairs of shoes. Or if you pull out all of your Tupperware and you realize that you have 50 Tupperware with no lids, then you're going to know you need to get rid of that stuff. Or if you have a ton of things in storage and you realize in one category you just have too much, then you can get rid of that. So I would apply the KonMari method to this by saying, after sorting it, I would only keep the things that are truly necessary. But I really liked that this book had a ton of practical, doable ways to organize your space and your papers. Like that was another big thing, is that it talks a lot about how to organize your papers and to put it into categories and things like that, so that you can cycle through your papers and not ever have a stack of papers. So this one taught me how to not only purge what I don't need, but the steps to clearing out and organizing them were just doable. It made the whole process really easy. It's been a few years since I've actually read this book, because I remember all of these things. It was easy to remember, easy to apply. But I want to go back and read it again, because I just thinking about all of this, it really made me want to go back and start again. But I like the tips for clearing out brain clutter on their website, and the encouragement for getting clear about why you want to get organized in the first place, and that you should map out your space and figure out, intentionally prepare beforehand your vision for what you want your space to look like. So I really recommend that one. And then finally is the Fly Lady method, and hers is I think an emotional approach to tidying. So FLY, F-L-Y, stands for Finally Love Yourself, and is full of techniques that speak to our overwhelm of the daily grind. And Marla Silly, she just breaks things down into create tasks that you can do in small chunks throughout the day. And that if you just do these regular rhythms throughout your day, then your house will just stay tidy, and you can set a timer for 15 minutes and have things just... One of the things she talks about is that your house should never be more than 15 minutes of dirtiness, right? You should be able to clean things up after 15 minutes. That doesn't really work in my house right now, but I get the point, is that if we can declutter to the point where it just takes us 15 minutes, at the same time, back when my house had been trashed, a story at the beginning of this episode, and my kids had trashed it, and I was super anxious, and I just decided to start a timer. The task of cleaning the whole space that I thought was going to take me all day only took an hour. And so it always ends up being a little bit easier than you think if you just set a timer and start. So Marla Silly, she encourages women to overcome their chaos or can't have anyone over syndrome by tackling one small habit at a time. I love all the small habits that add up to big wins. For example, she talks about getting dressed to shoes each morning, and it helps me to emotionally and physically get ready to tackle the day. She also talks about the swish and swipe method. That is a way to keep your bathrooms clean. You just always, each day or at the end of the day or each morning after you get out of the shower, you just wipe down the counters in the sink and you swipe out the toilet bowl and you're done. And one more is she talks about shining your kitchen sink at the end of the day, and that it's a way to start your day off on the right foot, knowing that you're not coming down to a mountain of dishes in the sink every morning. So these are just small habits that you can do throughout the day, and then she talks about tackling big projects in just one fell swoop. Like if your dining room table is always stacked with papers, like just set the timer for 15 minutes and just start and just tackle that thing. So I really like that. That Fly Lady is a system that I never stop learning about this. There's so much on her website and about how to create these rhythms and these systems in your life. So anyhow, this is important. Because I just want to convey to you guys that keeping our houses clean is not just to stress out our lives. It's not just because we don't want to be embarrassed when people stop in and things like that. But our stuff is a distraction. It's keeping us from accomplishing the things that are really important. And it's keeping us from coping. And the real reason why we need to tackle this and to tidy up is because we need to leave a legacy of our accomplishments and our passions. And we can't be passionate if we're distracted by our stuff. And we can't make our stuff our legacy. It just will never be the case. And so I hope that you'll check out the articles that I post in my show notes, because like this, why mess causes stress, 8 reasons, 8 remedies. There's 8 remedies in there that you can look at. But also, look into these books about tackling your chaos, tackling the clutter, because there are really great ways and reasons why we need to let go of these things. And that these things are ways to create a better legacy, to create a more intentional family culture, and to just be able to have quality time with our families rather than always being distracted by our stuff. So, thank you so much for listening. I love getting your feedback, and you can like and rate and share on your favorite broadcasting medium or social media platform. You can find me, of course, on iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and TuneIn Radio. But you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest at Family Culture Podcast, and on Twitter at _Family Culture. And come check out my show notes for sure. I'm going to have a ton of links and book recommendations on this article. And the URL is homeandfamilyculture.com. I also want to put in a mention here that if you are ever interested in starting a podcast, there is a wonderful resource that I use, and it's called Podcast Websites. And it's an investment in your future as a podcaster, that this has so much potential to create your passion and to be doing something that excites you and gets you. This is what I love about podcasting, is that it's something that I'm doing. It's something that I'm putting out there. And so you can see a link to learn more about Podcast Websites on my show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Mother Teresa once said, "If you want to change the world, go home and love your families."